Senator Simons.
Thank you very much, Madame la Présidente. Je prends la parole aujourd'hui au sujet du projet de loi C4, loi relative à certaines mesures en réponse à la COVID-19. Je profite de l'occasion que m'est offerte pour parler d'un élément précis du projet de loi, montre à quel point notre pays sait ce que signifie le fait de prendre soin de membres de sa famille. I'm speaking specifically about the Canada Recovery Caregiving Benefit, which provides a weekly benefit of $500 for up to 26 weeks to parents and guardians who have to take time off to care for a child under the age of 12 if that child has to be home for reasons related to COVID-19, or if that child's regular caregiver, be that a nanny, a day home provider, a grandparent, or a parent, is unable to look after the child for COVID-19 related reasons. Because while the bill is imperfect, I think we should acknowledge what a striking step this is in the recognition of the complexity of modern family life for Canadians today, and in recognizing the balances that need to be struck in the midst of this punishing pandemic. All around my province of Alberta, there are parents agonizing over the decision of whether it is safe for their children to return to the classroom or to daycare, or whether it will be better for them to learn at home. For other families, though, there really is no choice because they have a child with a chronic illness that makes them particularly vulnerable to COVID-19. The Canada Recovery Caregiving Benefit should make it possible for many of those parents or guardians to stay home to care for younger children, whether their kid is quarantined at home for a couple of weeks, or whether their school or daycare has to close temporarily because of a COVID outbreak, or whether a return to school could put that child's life in real risk. In the past, the expectation in a crisis such as this was that a parent, and let's be honest, in most cases we are talking about a mother, would have to quit their job or take an unpaid leave to stay home with kids. And this isn't some hypothetical. It's a dilemma parents are facing across the country right now. Just this morning, one of my staff called me to say that her 10-year-old son had been instructed to quarantine for 14 days because he'd been in close contact with someone in his grade 5 classroom right here in Ottawa who is now tested positive for COVID-19. Now, luckily, my staffer has been doing a fantastic job working from home to take care of me while she takes care of her son. But not everyone in Canada has a job that gives them that kind of flexibility or the option of working from home. That's why this legislation is particularly needed and needed now, as so many parents grapple with these similar situations. I'm grateful that this legislation recognizes that in 2020, it's neither fair nor economically wise to compel women to step out of the workforce without a path to return. This legislation recognizes that we can be parents and workers at the same time. In a moment when everything feels out of kilter, as if we're teetering on the edge, this legislation goes some way to helping parents to balance their family lives and their professional lives, which is always a tricky task and never more so than right now. Importantly, the legislation also recognizes the role of other family caregivers. Suppose you need to take time off because your adult child who has a developmental disability cannot live at his group home because it's been shut down by COVID. Suppose your parent or your spouse has Alzheimer's and can't go to their usual day program because of a coronavirus outbreak. This legislation also allows people who are caring for vulnerable family members to take some time off work with a government backstop of $500 a week. It is an important recognition that so many Canadians are struggling to care for the dependent adults in their lives in this time of unprecedented pandemic and need a little extra flexibility to do so. In a moment when families of all kinds and configurations are coping with the extraordinary medical, economic, and logistical challenges of COVID-19, I think we can be proud as Canadians to see so many of our leaders putting aside partisanship and reacting creatively to help our country's families through this crisis. And I think it's heartening that this bill received unanimous consent in the other place before coming here. This is a moment of clear-eyed recognition that says we can't just expect the women of Canada to sacrifice themselves to do the unpaid caregiving to shoulder the brunt of the burden coronavirus has placed on our communities. It is a recognition that family caregiving is labor, and labor of value, and a recognition that people should be able to step away from the workforce temporarily without leaving their families financially bereft. The Canada Recovery Caregiving Benefit is, if you'll allow me a moment of melodrama, a profoundly feminist piece of legislation, and at the same time, one that places family values squarely in the heart of feminism. As a working mother myself, and as someone who has spent much of the last few years juggling parenthood, career, and elder care, I think this is an extraordinarily important symbol and signal. There are those out there who would like us to believe that feminism and family values are antithetical. As this bill demonstrates, they are instead inextricably intertwined. I am also pleased to see that these rules don't require someone to stop work altogether. You can also apply for this benefit if you're working half as much as you used to do. If, for example, you've cut your hours or switched from full-time to half-time work. And it isn't just a benefit for those who draw salaries. It's available to the self-employed, to entrepreneurs, to contractors and gig workers too. That's also important because it recognizes that in 2020, work doesn't look the way that it did in 1950. La pandémie de COVID-19 nous a donné l'occasion de nous arrêter, de faire le point et de nous rendre compte à quel point notre famille est importante et à quel point nous devons compter sur l'amour et l'intention des membres de notre famille. La période que nous vivons est difficile et pénible. Rarement auparavant, nous nous sommes sentis aussi vulnérables et rarement nous avons eu autant besoin de membres de notre famille. Je suis moi-même encore en deuil de ma propre mère qui nous a quittés le mois dernier. Elle n'est pas morte de COVID-19, mais des complications d'un trouble médical chronique et le confinement a rendu bien pire. La COVID-19 fait de nombreuses victimes, mais les victimes qui ne sont pas toutes recensées dans les listes officielles de décès. En revanche, cette maladie a peut-être aussi un côté positif. Elle nous aide à voir à quel point nous devons compter sur notre famille et nos bons amis pour pouvoir traverser cette période difficile. Elle nous enseigne la valeur de l'amour. Is the Canada Recovery Benefit a perfect solution? No, it isn't. Some might argue with good reason that the cutoff age is somewhat arbitrary. This policy helps you out if your kid is 8 or 9 or 10 or 11, but not if they're 12 or 13. And yet, how many 12-year-olds can be left at home alone if they have COVID-19, or can be left unsupervised to attend grade 6 or 7 classes online? Some might argue, and fair enough, that 26 weeks of benefits, while generous on its face, might not be enough to get a family through a year without school or daycare. Some might argue, and this is true, that not every family has someone who can take time off to look after a parent with dementia or a child with special needs. If we had world enough and time, I'm sure we might have crafted a more perfect program. Frankly, I too would have liked more time for the Senate to analyze and weigh this legislation. But I also know that Canadian families of all shapes and sizes are waiting for the relief the Canada Recovery Caregiving Benefit will bring. There remain some important questions we need to ask about the way in which all the various elements of this bill might be implemented. The bill requires Canadians to apply for a range of benefits, but the very stresses and limitations of COVID-19 which make this bill necessary can also be impediments to many people who may need to complete an application. It's vitally important that we ensure that we have the supports in place to guide people through the application system, particularly people who may not be fluent in English or French, who may have literacy barriers of one kind or another, or who may not have easy access to the internet to apply online. We need to ensure, too, that there is a transparent and straightforward appeal process so that somebody who has been turned down for benefits can be assured of a fair and efficient hearing should they wish to challenge that decision. Of course, it is important to protect the integrity of the program and have the necessary safeguards in place to prevent abuse. That said, we also need to understand that at a time of medical or financial or family crisis, many people may not have the wherewithal to navigate a complicated application system. The Government of Canada and the workers who delivered our first round of COVID-19 relief plans deserve our praise and our thanks for the remarkably efficient way they rolled out those earlier benefits. I hope they will build on their successes and learn from their failures as well to make the benefits provided in this bill as fair and accessible as possible. Yes, there are those, even in my home province, who might scoff that relief benefits such as these just allow people to sit around eating cheesies and watching cartoons. And will there be a handful of people who might try to game the system? Undoubtedly, such is human nature. But when future historians look back at the way Canadians have risen to this occasion, at the way people from across the country and across the political spectrum have pitched in to help neighbors in need in practical and inventive ways, I think we'll all have reason to feel justifiably proud, because this crisis has also shown us human nature and Canadian society at their very best. Merci, thank you, and hi-hi.